Deep in the middle of a harsh winter, a queen sits sewing by a window. Her needle slips. A single drop of bright red blood falls and strikes the snow resting on the sill. Looking at that vivid contrast of bright red against pure white, she makes a specific wish. She asks for a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as the ebony window frame. Shortly after, a baby girl is born, perfectly matching those exact traits. But the original queen dies soon after the birth. A new queen steps into the power vacuum, bringing a completely different energy to the castle. She is fiercely proud, highly ambitious, and entirely obsessed with her own reflection. Snow White is the living embodiment of an innocent, quiet wish. The new queen builds her authority on a foundation of absolute superficiality. The two are on an inevitable collision course. To maintain her psychological dominance, the new queen relies on a daily ritual. She consults a magical mirror, demanding to know who is the fairest in the land. For years, the mirror gives her the exact validation she craves, confirming her supremacy. Children grow. When Snow White turns 7, the daily ritual breaks. The mirror hesitates, and then declares that the young princess has surpassed the queen in beauty. The reaction is immediate. Driven by pure rage, the queen summons her royal huntsman. She orders him to take the child deep into the forest, execute her, and bring back her heart as proof of the deed. Deep in the woods, the huntsman draws his knife. But faced with a terrified, pleading child, his resolve shatters. He tells her to run and never return. To deceive his ruler, he kills a wild boar, taking its heart back to the castle. An ego built entirely on appearance cannot tolerate a rival. It demands absolute destruction to feel secure. Because of that insecurity, a completely sheltered child is now forced to navigate the lethal dangers of the dark woods entirely on her own. Snow White runs blindly through the dense, shadowy forest until the trees finally part. In a quiet clearing, she discovers a tiny cottage, practically glowing with warmth. Starving and exhausted, she slips inside. The house is remarkably organized. She finds 7 small plates, 7 cups, and 7 perfectly made little beds. She takes a cautious sip and bite from each, tries every bed until she finds one that fits, and falls asleep instantly. That evening, the owners return from the mines. 7 dwarves walk in to find their neat home disturbed. They nervously check their chairs and plates in exaggerated panic before finding the sleeping princess. Moved by her appearance, they quietly share the remaining beds and let her rest. In the morning, they form a mutual pact. Snow White shares her tragic story about the stepmother and the huntsman. The dwarves immediately offer her a deal. Keep the house in order, and they will provide absolute, unwavering protection. The queen sits in a massive castle, isolated by her own paranoia and vanity. Snow White, by simply being open and vulnerable, immediately builds a loyal, protective community around herself. Back at the castle, the mirror exposes the huntsman's lie. The queen realizes physical force failed, so she pivots to dark magic, disguising herself as an old peddler woman to hunt the girl herself. She crosses the mountains to the cottage, offering beautiful laced bodices. Snow White, curious and trusting, opens the door. The old woman laces the girl so tightly she suffocates and collapses on the floor. It is only the dwarves returning at dusk, cutting the laces in a panic, that saves her life. The mirror confirms the girl is still breathing. The queen's frustration boils over into a second attempt. She crafts a poisoned comb and shifts into a completely different disguise. This time, Snow White is cautious and refuses to open the door. The queen adapts, gently coaxing the girl to try the comb through the open window. The moment the teeth touch her scalp, the poison takes hold. Once again, the dwarves arrive just in time to pull the comb loose. Psychological obsession operates on a tightening loop. Each time the queen fails, her attacks become more deceptive, more intimate, and closer to bypassing the defenses the dwarves are trying to build around their friend. The queen realizes she needs a weapon that circumvents suspicion entirely. She enchants an apple, letting the poison settle only in the bright, appealing red half, leaving the pale side perfectly safe. Disguised as a humble farmer, she approaches the cottage. When Snow White refuses entry, the woman employs a brilliant psychological trick. She cuts the apple in two, eating the safe white half herself to prove it's harmless. Trusting the logic, Snow White takes the red half and takes a bite. She drops immediately. When the dwarves return, there are no laces to cut and no comb to pull. Their desperate attempts to revive her fail entirely. Heartbroken, they build a glass coffin, placing it on the mountainside to keep a permanent vigil over her. Where a huntsman's knife failed, a carefully constructed lie succeeds. Innocence is sealed away behind glass, and the queen, finally hearing the mirror validate her once more, reclaims her absolute control over the kingdom. Seasons pass until a traveling prince rides through the forest. He spots the glass coffin on the mountainside and is captivated. He pleads with the dwarves, asking to take the coffin with him so he can properly honor her memory. The dwarves reluctantly agree. The prince's servants lift the heavy glass case and begin the trek down the mountain. On the rocky, uneven path, one of the servants misses a step. His foot catches a rock, sending a sharp jolt through the entire coffin. That sudden jolt dislodges the poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She draws a sharp breath. Her eyes flutter open, and the curse shatters instantly. The queen's intricate dark magic is ultimately defeated by a clumsy footstep. The dwarf's persistent devotion kept her safe just long enough for a completely uncalculated accident to arrive. Overjoyed, the prince immediately asks Snow White to marry him. They return to his castle and prepare a massive, brightly lit royal wedding, inviting nobles from across the land. The wicked queen is on that guest list. Before departing for the ceremony, she checks her mirror one last time, fully expecting praise. Instead, the mirror delivers a terrifying realization. The young bride is fairer. Driven to a panic, the queen rushes to the wedding hall. She pushes through the crowd, locks eyes with a radiant, living Snow White, and realizes her total defeat. For her crimes, she is forced to step into red-hot iron shoes and dance uncontrollably until she drops dead. The kingdom stabilizes. Snow White and the prince rule with compassion, frequently welcoming the 7 dwarfs to the castle as eternal, honored guests. An obsession with being the best is a fire that eventually consumes itself, leaving a person completely isolated. Genuine kindness works in the opposite direction. It quietly builds a resilient, protective community that can outlast the darkest of winters.